Hi, my name is Bea and today I'm leading real life youth at home. Today we're going to be looking at the story of Elijah and Elisha, two prophets who were chosen by God to hear his message and take it to his people. Our take-home message for today is hope is alive because he is alive. Elisha and Elijah knew this and so do I. Okay, real life youth, let's get things started with a game. You're going to need a blindfold, you're going to need some marbles, and you're going to need some water. So for this game, you need to get yourself a blindfold and an obstacle course. And we're going to guide the blindfolded person through the obstacles. Nate, take 3 steps forward, 4 steps right. Take 2 steps forward. I hope you had fun having a go at those games, real life youth. Don't forget to add this week's Song of Hope to your playlist. It's called You Keep Hope Alive and it is such a belter. It speaks brilliant truth and it gets stuck in your head so that you end up singing You Keep Hope Alive over and over again during your day. It's absolutely brilliant. Make sure you add it to your playlist, get it on your phone and be listening to that. Pump some hope into your day. Now let's find out how Elijah and Elisha knew that hope was alive in this week's story, read to us by Afia.
So today we've got 2 stories. The first story is taken from the book of 1 Kings chapter 17 verses 7 to 16. And it's the story about the widow of Zarephath. So I'll read. And after a while the brook dried up, because there was no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there, gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, Bring me a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. And she said, As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar, and a little oil in a jug. And now I am gathering a couple of sticks, that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat of it and die. And Elijah said to her, Do not fear. Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. And she went and did as Elijah said. And she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Now we go on to the second story. So the second story is taken from the second book of Kings. So 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 to 7. Now this story is about Elisha and the widow's oil. Now, the wife of one of the sons of the prophets cried to Elisha, Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord, but the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves. And Elijah said to her, What shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you in the house? And she said, Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. Then he said, Go outside, borrow vessels from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not too few. Then go in and shut the door behind yourself and your sons, and pour into all these vessels. And when one is full, set it aside. So she went from him and shut the door behind herself and her sons. And as she poured, they brought the vessels to her. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. And he said to her, There is not another. Then the oil stopped. She came and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on the rest.
Do you get grumpy when you're hungry? I do all the time. The widow that Elijah meets in this story was starving hungry. There was a famine in the land, which meant that it hadn't rained for a really long time. The crops hadn't grown and the animals had died. It was like going to the supermarket and having completely empty shelves. She'd been spreading out the food carefully, using a little bit each day, but now she was preparing to cook her very last meal. Then she was ready for her and her son to die of starvation. It must have seemed completely hopeless. Elijah was a prophet, which meant that he was chosen by God to hear God's message and take it to God's people. Elijah meets this woman collecting sticks, and he asks her to share the very last bit of food that she had. Now, I don't know about you, but I would have really struggled to share that last bit of food that me and my son were about to eat. What about if someone asked for your last biscuit, or somebody asked to eat your last chocolate bar? What about if you had to share your pocket money? It's not always easy. God asks this lady to share what little she has. She must have really wanted to eat that food herself, but she shares anyway. And God rewards her faithfulness by giving her exactly what she needs. The little jar of oil and the little pot of flour don't run out. And in fact, she has enough to feed her son, and Elijah every day until the rain falls again. God gave her enough. God didn't make her a millionaire. He didn't deliver her a huge Asda shop to fill her shelves. He gave her just enough. Elisha was also a prophet of God, and he meets a widow who's incredibly poor as well. In fact, she's so poor that she owes money to lots of people and can't pay them. They've threatened to take her sons as slaves in payment. She was absolutely desperate. She had nothing in her house to sell. She begs and pleads with Elisha to help her. And he says to her, What is it that you already have? Well, looking around, she didn't feel like she had anything. But actually, she had got a small jar of oil with a tiny little bit of oil left in the bottom. It must have seemed hopeless to try and repay her debts with such a tiny amount. That was enough for God. He used that tiny bit of oil to fill up all of the jugs and jars and containers that she could find and borrow. She was able to sell the oil, to repay her debts, save her sons, and they were able to live off that money. He provided exactly what she needed. He provided enough. Sometimes it's easy to focus on what we don't have rather than making the most of and sharing the things that we do have, even the little things that God has given us. God always gives us enough. He shared his most precious son with us so that we could always have hope. Even when things are difficult and we feel like we've lost things or they've been taken away from us, Our hope is alive because he is alive. Jesus is always enough. Now it's time to make some craft together. This week we are going to have a go at making one of these sensory jars which has got oil in it, just like the jars with oil in it in our story. You can make them with any colours you like. If you don't have a jar with a lid, you could maybe use an empty plastic bottle or even your drinks bottle. You can use oil or you can just use water. And if you want to get really funky, you can also use glitter glue. It's got really cool bubbles in it. And when you shake it up, woo, look at it go. You can watch the glitter and the bubbles as you think about all of the amazing things that God has given you. Even the things that are really small, that you might not think are worth mentioning, that might seem insignificant. Well, as we see from the story today, God can take something tiny that we don't think can be used for much, and he can turn it into something incredible. He will always give us enough. You can practice gratitude before you go to bed, on the way to school, in your garden, anywhere and everywhere. What are some of the things that God has provided you with that you are thankful for? Thanks for joining us today, Real Life Youth. Remember, hope is alive because he is alive. Elijah and Elisha knew it, and so do I. Have a great week.